DC Comics does not miss. They are firing on all cylinders right now. So, what this comic does is this opens up with the Joker kidnapping Lex Luthor, as all great DC stories do, right? The Joker doing a thing to another guy. Now, there is a little bit of context to this, and to explain this, it's really just Lex Luthor hunting for a particular artifact. And in fact, Batman and Superman come to this realization pretty quickly. They're basically just like watching a game go down, but Superman picks up on the fact that there's an alarm that goes off from Star Labs in the Gotham branch. And what he says is they've been developing an artificial neuroenhancer to boost brain power tenfold. And that of course it's exactly the sort of gizmo that Lex Luthor would covet. And he's there now trying to attain it. The problem is that seemingly as soon as he gets his hands on it, that's when Joker kidnaps him. Because Lex Luthor becomes intangible, right? He's like, who could possibly match my advances in decorporealization, literally turning him into an intangible object. And where Lex Luthor was like, that was insane, because he almost got hit by a train. Joker appears to him and just says, that's the sanest thing that you're going to see all day. And as soon as Lex Luthor sees the Joker, he's like, oh, for the love of God, give me the train. Just let me die. I love seeing the Joker and Lex Luthor interact with each other. I don't know why, but it's just phenomenal. But what ends up happening is with Batman and Superman hot on the trail, right? They're just kind of like, okay, there's no sign of Lex Luthor here. It's like he vanished into thin air. Not only that, where Batman teases the idea of teleportation, Superman says there's no ionic trail, so we can't follow his teleportation anywhere. And so Batman's just like, I'll alert Gordon and Batgirl, but for now, all we can really do is keep a lookout. But the kicker about this is that Batman gets an alert, and he says, now we have two problems, right? Alfred reports that the Joker broke out of Arkham earlier today, and so it's like coincidence, right? Like they couldn't possibly be working together. But that's kind of the nuts thing, because in that moment, you switch back to Lex Luthor going after the Joker, and he cannot physically touch him. And so watching these two guys talk is hilarious, because Lex Luthor is just like, where did you get that thing, right? I cannot imagine you building a birdhouse, much less a dematerializer. And that's where the Joker's just like, I mean, it was a gift, right? Bad Ears has an old enemy named Dr. X. And you know what they say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, because Joker killed this dude. And took his tech. And so Lex is just like, turn me back to normal. And that's where Joker just says, well, I mean, then you'll leave after I went through all this trouble to find you. No dice, Chrome Dome. I'll make you fully solid again, only if you promise to help me. And so where the Joker did technically double-cross, he's double-crossed Lex Luthor a bunch of times. Let's be honest, there's no reason for Lex Luthor to willingly work with the Joker. There's no reason for anyone to work with the Joker. I certainly wouldn't, but Joker is just like bygones, right? Besides, what's a little slap fight over one measly treasure? And he says, when this time, there's so much more joy to go around. And he's like, we're walking, and we're walking. And so Lex Luthor's like, fine. And he starts following the Joker. And he's like, more joy, right? I'm listening, turn me back. And the Joker just says, right? Fair warning, I've booby-trapped this backpack to blow up if it's torn off. And Lex is like, wait, so you could be killed? Finally, some good news. And Joker's just like, let's step into my hacienda. And Lex is just like looking at this thing, right? It's just like a giant version of Joker's head. And he's like, somebody actually designed this for you? And Joker's just like, I mean, you know, not willingly, but it's hysterical what architects will do when you kidnap their wife. And he's like, come on, man, join me in my humble abode. And of course, this is when Joker kind of turns into like Joker from the animated series, right? He's like, I so rarely have company, right? Take a seat. And he's like, don't sit there, like, but you know, sit over there. He's like, you're a man of dignity, and I can respect that. And he's like, ready for ultimate knowledge? And Lex doesn't know what this is. Now, we know what this is, right? Lex is just like, are those headphones, right? If you're recommending a podcast, I will skin you alive. And the Joker says, no. Right? Hawkman gear, alien tech, is called an Absorbascon. Now, here's a funny thing. A lot of people who are familiar with DC in this day and age think the Absorbascon originally debuted in Justice League Unlimited. It did not. It actually debuted in Hawkman number 13 back in 1966. And where Lex makes a joke about it sounding like a vacuum cleaner, and Joker says, actually, the rumor is that it has the key to infinite knowledge. That's true. The nature of the Absorbascon in the old Hawkman comics is that while it was used on kind of a minor level, right, absorbing knowledge from a person, the reality is that the Absorbascon can absorb all knowledge from all people anywhere in the world that the person resides on. Now, I don't know if the Absorbascon can actually transcend Earth and absorb all knowledge from all sentient life across the universe. Even if it could, I don't know what good it'll do. Lex Luthor's really smart, Joker's crazy, but I don't know if their brains could handle the absorption of all knowledge from all sentient beings across the universe at one time. That would probably just put either one of them in a catatonic state. But in response to the Joker talking about how it contains infinite knowledge, Lex just says, that's the first interesting thing you've said. Go on. Right? And Joker says, Ira Quimby, super genius. And he says, Ira put a trace on it once, right? Followed it all the way to get this, a museum. And Lex is just like, that's absurd, right? Like, we are done here. And he's like, your information is bogus. Why would something that powerful be on public display? And even if it is, it's a museum, right? Any Gotham criminal worth a damn could crack a museum like an egg. Why do you need me? And that's where the Joker's like, well, I mean, there's complications that only you can really overcome. And he's like, aren't you at least a little bit curious about this thing? I mean, imagine what a guy like you could do with infinite knowledge. And as they say, flattery will get you everywhere. And so that's where Lex is just like, okay. But like at the first hit of Betrayal, I will teleport you into the sun. You guys see what I'm talking about, right? Like Lex and Joker, like we need a team up book with these guys, right? We need a Lex and Joker team up book. It's absolutely amazing. And Joker's just kind of like, I mean, I would expect nothing less, right? And so what they do is they jump to the Midway City Museum. And those of you guys who are familiar with Midway City, you know what Midway City is about. And you know who resides here, right? And so when they arrive there, Lex is just like, remarkable, right? You were right about complications. These alarms have been augmented by technology that's not of this earth. And he's like, thank God, because for a minute, I thought I was going crazy. And that's where Lex says, regardless, you are onto something, right? He says, no one needs something this complex to guard a history exhibit, only for us to find out the person that's here is Carter Hall Hawkman. Now, at this point, you're probably asking yourself the question, okay, Rob, make it make sense. Because right now, the Joker and Lex Luthor and Hawkman are in the DCKO tournament, along with Superman, and Batman is in Night Fight, literally facing off against his own mind. What is happening here? Okay, here's the thing to know about World's Finest. This comic takes place in the early days of Batman and Superman, long before all this stuff is going on in DCKO. So that's how we can get this story, right? That's how you get any of the Batman, Superman, World's Finest stories. They all take place in the early days. It's the reason why you see moments in the comic where they're facing off against enemies that they already know of by now. But at that point, they're meeting them for the first time. Like when Superman and Batman go to the Kingdom Come Reality and face off against Darkseid, and Darkseid is this overwhelming threat. Yes, we covered it, and yes, you will find it in the World's Finest playlist at the end of the video. But in response to all of this, Hawkman does exactly what you would expect. He goes and puts on the suit. And so while Lex and Joker are walking through this facility, Lex is just like, so no sign of any guards. Still, do not touch anything, and do not get greedy. And so in that moment, they hear something. Literally, Lex is like, do you hear that? And Joker's like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like something's coming, right? Why does it sound like wings flapping? And Hawkman's like, because it is, bro, and just like attacks them both. He doesn't really say that, but it'd be dope if he did, right? But like, Hawkman goes after them. Now, Lex Luthor gets hit, but here's a funny thing, right? Lex Luthor is used to this kind of thing. And so that's why the Joker says, right, I can see why there's no need for guards if you have a Hawkman. And Carter just tells him, right, you are both pretty far from home and very unwelcome here. I always tell Batman Arkham Asylum should be relocated to another planet. And Joker's just kind of like, I surrender, right? And then just like sprays Hawkman, right? So it's enough to distract Carter. It's certainly not enough to defeat him. But Lex tells the Joker, right, go find the prize. I will handle Hawkman. And Hawkman's just kind of like, I doubt that, right? And that's where Lex is like, look, bro, I've gone toe-to-toe with Superman. B-listers are a walk in the park. Imagine being Hawkman and Lex Luthor is talking trash to you to your face and calling you a B-lister when Hawkman is pretty dope. Like, let me tell you something about Hawkman, dude. This guy is a hoss. People underestimate how strong Hawkman is. Like, a lot of people underestimate how capable Hawkman is. This guy can go toe-to-toe with Superman, and he has, right? But, of course, Joker just starts making his way through the facility, and he ends up coming across the office of Carter Hall. And so one of the things he says here, right, he's like, criminaling 101. The best stuff is always in the vaults. And when he starts looking through, he sees like all this tech from Thanagar, all these weapons and arms and armament that Carter Hall has. But what he's looking for the most is the Absorbascon, which is just sitting right over there. And so then we jump back to Hawkman and Lex, and he says, if you're going to fight me, Luthor, at least pretend to try. And so Hawkman almost gets killed fighting Lex when Lex goes on the attack, but he's saved by Batman and Superman, who arrive on the scene when they got the signal from Carter Hall telling them Joker and Lex are here. And so Batman asks the question, right, where's the clown? And Joker's like, aiming for the load-bearing beams, son, and just fires at the roof, and it all comes crashing down on Batman, Superman, and Hawkman. And so, of course, Lex Luthor grabs Joker, they fly out. The Joker just says, right, keep flying. Why can you never find a good lead-lined room when you need one? And while Hawkman is kind of subdued by all the debris collapsing onto him, Batman's like, he'll be fine, right? We have to go take care of Lex, and we have to take care of the Joker, because the reality here is we don't even know why they're here in the first place. But if they're breaking into a museum that's being personally guarded by Hawkman, whatever they're going after has to be incredibly powerful. And that's where Joker says, right, the good news is the Absorbascon is ours. And Lex says the better news is the Absorbascon is mine, you chalk-skinned oaf. Hand it over or I will drop you. And that's where the two of them start fighting over this thing, right? Batman and Superman get onto the scene and they're like, no, we need to stop these guys, right? Literally Batman says, my God, they're wrestling over the Absorbascon while they're falling. But then they crash into the ground and then suddenly they merge. And that's where Joker just pops up and he's like, I told you to be careful, and just starts laughing at himself because Joker and Lex have merged into a singular person now. And at that point, Batman's like, are you all right? And Superman's like, I just need a second, right? And then Batman, in looking at all of this, and says, I don't know what the hell kind of energy powered that ray, but it didn't take well to being released so violently. And Superman's like, actually, like, did it merge Luthor and Joker? And they go after him and phase right through them. The reason being is because now Superman and Batman are intangible. And Joker tells him that, right? Like, are you blind? I'm twice the nightmare. And best of all, now you can't lay a finger on me or anything else ever again. And he bolts. And so at that point, you switch over to Carter Hall a little while later, like once he recovers. And he just says, Justice League Satellite, this is Hawkman, who is on monitor duty. And Hawkman's like, go for Adam, which is weird because I guess Cyborg is not the one playing security guard. And he just says, Adam, right, a few minutes ago, Superman, Batman, and I were battling the Luthor Joker team. I was taken out momentarily and awakened alone by the sound of an explosion across town. Can you lock a location on either Superman or Batman? But because they're intangible, it cannot be done. Because as far as anybody's concerned, they don't exist as far as radars go. Now, of course, Hawkman eventually catches up to them and Hawkman is able to spot them, but until then, Batman starts putting his mind to work because Superman starts looking at all of this and he just says, okay, if I concentrate and focus, of course, I can kind of gain some measure of steady footing. And he says, but that's the distraction that cost us eyes on Joker and Luthor, or rather whatever they became. My powers are gone in this form, so I cannot trail them. But Batman realizes, he says, it may not simply be a matter of focus. And he's like, come over here, right? We still have some molecular cohesion, at least enough to normalize, but only if we work together. Now, if you are familiar with the history of World's Finest, you know exactly what's coming next, because being able to pick up that rock is the two of them picking up the rock at the same time. And so that's where Carter Hall arrives on the scene, right? And he's like, okay, like, so at least you guys are alive. But Batman says, right, we might have a workaround for this whole immaterial situation, but this is the least of our problems. And he says, they got away with your Absorbascon, and with it, they have complete access to the combined knowledge of the entire human race. And so then you get to the headquarters of Lex Luthor. Now this is dope, right? I love this whole interaction here because we learned something cool about how Lex Luthor builds his headquarters in relation to Superman. That Joker says, as secret headquarters go, this is no fun, right? You don't have a single room shaped like your head. And he says, at least my hacienda's hidden, right? Soup would find this joint in a blink. And that's where Lex says, it's a lead-lined sub-basement. Whenever I set up a new lab, I put a decoy on top to fool him, because one of the things to keep in mind is Superman's X-ray vision does not work on lead-lined rooms. So it's a perfect way to hide his real base of operations. And it's cool to know that Lex does this kind of stuff all the time. And he says, now, if you don't mind, I'm going to create an energy crowbar to separate myself from a criminally insane sociopath. But that's where Joker says, wrong, right? You're going to drop your brain walls, and literally starts to take over the mind of Lex. Not in so much that he like enslays Lex Luthor, but in the sense that Joker's Joker's the one running the show, using the mental capacities of Lex. So it's like Joker with Lex Luthor's mind. And so when Joker starts channeling the power of the Absorbacon, Lex Luthor realizes everything that can be achieved with this thing. That's why he says, my God, right? The Absorbascon. Every mind on earth is open to me. And Joker just says, to us, right? Ultimate knowledge. Anything known by anyone alive is ready for easy access. And he's like, no way, right? That's who killed Tupac? I love how DC does that, right? Batman sits on the Mobius chair. He learns there's 3 Jokers. Joker takes the Absorbascon. He's got access to all knowledge across the world. And his question is like, so that's who killed Tupac? But Lex says, so much information, the things that I can learn. But Joker's like, no, right? Rush, learn. You brainy types are all alike. And so Joker takes it off and he tells Lex, like, what we need right now is your brain power in order to put this thing to a much grander use, because it's the Joker. And the Joker's nothing if not a man full of sadistic plans. And so at that point, you jump back to Midway City when Hal Jordan has been called in as a reinforcement. But there's a particular reason why he had been called, because what he says is Hawkman's tagging out to search the area. You boys ordered a Green Lantern, and Superman says, you will not remember this, Hal. You were under the devil Nisa's control at the time. But a while back, Superman and I faced off against you. Your willpower was compromised, so we were able to join ours and force your ring to do something it never had before. Join the 2 of us into one body. And he says that might give us enough substance to become solid and try again. That's why I say, if you've been reading World's Finest since its launch, you knew what was coming when they both picked up the rock at the same time, because that's exactly what happens here. Hal Jordan uses the power of the ring to merge Superman and Batman into one being. That happened in the first story arc, The Devil Nisa, right? That'll be in the playlist as well. But still, right? They are now merged into one person, and they look just as dope as they ever did. I'm so glad to see this merger return. It was exceedingly popular when it first came out, and it's popular still. But here's the crazy thing. At this point, because their powers are now combined and they have access to their abilities, we start to hear broadcasts, right? Coastal Flight 76 approaching Metropolis Tower, requesting clearance, and then the pilot just starts going nuts and just starts laughing, right? And the co-pilot's like, pull up, man, pull up. And so like Superman, Batman merge, right? They literally bring this plane back to safety, and the pilot is just like laughing to himself. And so Batman's like, Clark, like, are you hearing anything? And Superman just says, I can hear the Joker's laugh, Bruce, all across the metro area. It's everywhere, right? Mobsters are going crazy and blowing each other to pieces. A guy's jumping off of a building, right? Like this wife is just going to attack her husband and basically kill him. Everywhere, people are going nuts. And that's when the Joker says, you said it yourself, Lexi, my noggin contains ideas and concepts capable of driving the ordinary mind mad. He says, I would have said a singular vision, but semantics. The point is, the Absorbascon is greedy. It takes knowledge, but I'm feeling generous today. Rather than hoard my outlook on life, why not flip the switch and let the whole city see the world as I do? And so everyone's going haywire. And so that kind of ties up Superman and Batman trying to rescue as many people as possible and basically saving them from themselves, which for the most part they successfully do. But Batman, in analyzing all of this, he says, my God, Clark, they've turned the Absorbascon into a transmitter. Joker's made his madness contagious. And that's where Superman says, right, it hasn't spread outside Metropolis, so that means that he's still here. And he says, remember, we can see beyond the visible spectrum. So however this plague is being transmitted, it might be visible. And that's when they look and they realize, bingo, they find its point of origin. And so they immediately respond and chase down and finally find Lex and Joker. And through all of this, Lex just says, oh dear, right? Did you not think that your clowning would draw attention? Who is that, right? Because they've never seen Superman and Batman merge together before. And that's when Joker analyzes it. And it's just like Batman and Superman have combined into a single form. And so it's like, okay, right? At that point, Batman's like, hurry, like we have to take this guy out, because Batman immediately realizes that if Joker and Lex have the ability to read minds using the Absorbascon to learn knowledge, there's a huge risk being taken here in recognizing that Batman and Superman have combined into a single form. And so in that moment, the Joker starts blasting Superman with kryptonite, right? Blasting this merged body. And he says, nice, right? He asks Lex, do you always have kryptonite baked into your battle suit? And Lex is like, what can I say, right? You always got to be prepared. And so he says, it's so satisfying, but before he dies and they die, let's take advantage of the moment, right? Because Lex is thinking about this strategically, right? And Joker isn't really thinking about it in that way. He's like, you know, you accuse me of getting ahead of my skis, impetuous fool that I am, but you're a little too focused. And that's where Lex is just like, so what are you gassing on about now? And that's where Joker says, right, you heard this thing. He's half Superman, but half Batman. That means he's only going to be half as affected by the kryptonite. And so in turn, Batman as Superman grab Joker and Lex and then send them flying, right? And that's where Batman says, some genius, right? I never dreamed anything could hurt that much, Clark. I am sorry. And Clark's like, green kryptonite is agonizing, but thanks to you, not fatal. Now, Bruce, be careful. You're throwing him too hard because it's been a long time since Bruce and Superman merged. Bruce doesn't normally have strength like this. So if he's not careful, not only could he kill Joker and Lex, which may not necessarily be the worst thing, but he could destroy buildings with innocent people by throwing that battle suit through the building. Not necessarily because the battle suit with Lex and Joker is astronomically powerful or anything like that. I mean, it is, but it's like a tornado throwing a piece of straw through a telephone pole. With enough force, any object of any size can become astronomically dangerous. And so, of course, Superman responds by basically, you know, making sure the building's safe and that kind of a thing. And so ultimately just kind of comes down to like hand-to-hand combat between these guys. And Superman says, right, hand-to-hand combat, however, that's your specialty. I will let you deal with just the knockdown, drag-out fight. But that's when things get dope, because facing off against these guys when they have the Absorbascon changes everything. Because when Batman goes to punch, they counter, right? Joker and Lex counter, and he says, that's Jeet Kune Do. How did he see that coming? And Superman says, the Absorbascon. He knows every move that we're going to make and how you fight. He's literally going to counter everything. And Superman just says, right, put him away before they learn everything. And that's where Joker starts taunting him, right? He's like, that's right, put him up, right? Put up your dukes. Give me the old 1-2. Let's see what you got, Bruce. And then at that point, Bruce is just like, oh my God. And Superman's like, oh my God. And it's like, they know our identities. And in fact, Lex and Joker say, all those years, Kent, all that time, you were making a fool of me right under our nose. And where Batman's like, oh my God, no, right? Lex and Joker are like, yes, we know it all. Everything you keep hidden. But don't worry though, we're not greedy with our secrets. In fact, we are sharing them with the world. They literally use the Absorbascon to reveal the identities of Bruce Wayne as Batman and Clark Kent as Superman with everyone across the planet. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We got to wait for the next issue to come out. I think it comes out next month. Make sure you guys get caught up with the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.